Reuters is taking some heat tonight for sitting on a story during the 2018 Senate campaign between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. On Friday, the outlet publishing previously discovered information that Beto O'Rourke was a former member of the hacking group known as Cult of the Dead Cow, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. But his campaign was not affected by this, folks. A record $6.1 million raised during the first 24 hours of the launch, putting Beto ahead of all the other Democratic candidates on day one. Kristen Fisher, live in Washington tonight with more. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Martha. Well, this was quite a scoop by Reuters, a prominent presidential candidate's involvement in America's oldest hacking group. Problem is that the reporter that wrote it had known about it for over a year. Joseph Menz says he sat on it because he'd struck a deal with members of that hacking group that you were talking about, Cult of the Dead Cow, which he was writing a book about. They'd confirm O'Rourke's involvement in the group, but only if men agreed to hold the peace. Reuters is now defending the deal as a common arrangement between journalists and sources, and apparently the candidate himself. Quote, in an interview in late 2017, O'Rourke acknowledged that he was a member of the group on the understanding that the information would not be made public until after his Senate race against Ted Cruz in November 2018. Well, Cruz responded by saying, so Reuters had evidence in 2017 that Beto may have committed multiple felonies, which Beto confirmed on the record, but deliberately withheld the story for over a year to help him win his Senate race. But when he's running against Bernie, etc., now it's news? Well, the group O'Rourke was a member of was responsible for things like hacking into computers and stealing credit card numbers, though the Reuters report says that O'Rourke never engaged in the, quote, edgiest sort of hacking activity. But he did contribute to the group's electronic magazine under the handle Psychedelic Warlord, including a fictional story that he wrote when he was 15 that involved running over children with a car. And here's a clip or a excerpt of it. He wrote, as I neared the young ones, I put all my weight on my right foot, keeping the accelerator pedal on the floor until I heard the crashing of the two children on the hood, and then the sharp cry of pain from one of the two. I was so fascinated for a moment that when after I had stopped my vehicle, I just sat in a daze, sweet visions filling my head. Well, after the story resurfaced, O'Rourke said, I'm mortified to read it now, incredibly embarrassed, but I have to take ownership of my words. Whatever my intention was as a teenager doesn't matter. I have to look long and hard at my actions, at the language I have used, and I have to constantly try to do better. So O'Rourke is acknowledging that it is really hateful stuff what he was writing. Those are his words. But he's asking everybody to remember that he was only 15 years old at the time that he wrote it, Martha.
That is an important fact. Kristen, thank you very much. Joining me now, Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist. Ben, great to see you. Thanks for coming back tonight. Where to begin? Okay, the hacking. Is it awful? Is it bad? Is it going to hurt him?
First off, it's very on brand for a Gen X candidate for president to be a member of a hacking group. I think it really fits with its overall skateboarding and punk rock sort of message. But let's step back for a moment and recognize this. There was no candidate who the press was more in the tank for in 2018 than Beto O'Rourke. And the fact is that if his name was Bob and he'd been running against somebody other than Ted Cruz, that would just not have been the case. The fact is that everyone who was really part of the media in that state wrote profile after profile, glowingly portraying a guy who collected all the right vinyl, knew all the hip things, was totally engaged in it, in culture and that kind of thing. And now that he's actually up against a couple of other Democrats in a race for the presidency, the standard is different. Now, these early fundraising numbers, they are impressive. But to me, the real question is, can this cult of personality around Beto O'Rourke survive the tests that are going to come with running for president, particularly in a moment when the Democratic base seems to be a lot more engaged in identity politics, intersectionality and the like, and a lot more skeptical of maybe nominating another white guy.
So here's what he said about his wife and his family that got blowback. Let's see what you think. Play this.
I just got a call from my wife, Amy, who's back in El Paso, Texas, where she is raising, sometimes with my help, Ulysses, who's 12 years old, Molly, who's 10, and their little brother, Henry, who is 8 years old.
So he got some heat for saying, occasionally, sometimes with my help. So then he comes out and he says this, watch.
Not only will I not say that again, but I'll be much more thoughtful going forward in the way that I talk about our marriage, and also the way in which I acknowledge the truth of the criticism that I have enjoyed white privilege.
Look,
unpack all that, Ben.
Martha, I think he was trying to be self-deprecating.
Absolutely, the initial comment is harmless.
Yes, but again, this is just the line that everybody has to tread on now within the Democratic field. You know, CNN the other day, after he announced, pointed out that he was a white male 52 separate times in one day. Okay, and this is going to be, I think, a real aspect of this race. Do you want something that's forward-looking, and does that require, you know, sort of more diversity and more wokeness on the part of the candidate? You know, Beto O'Rourke.
He said it's a disadvantage.
He does say it's a disadvantage, and I think that, you know, to a certain extent, you know, we saw the dynamic that played out with Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio in 2016. This could be a similar situation with O'Rourke and Joe Biden, competing for kind of a centrist lane in a time when people may want something very different.
Neither one of them got the nomination.
No, we know how that turned out, Martha.
So who's that person?
That's the big question.
Who's the Donald Trump equivalent?
That's the big question.
To bust it all up.
And I think that that's going to end up being someone who may end up challenging a lot of the assumptions that are ingrained in establishment Democratic quarters about what they want in a candidate for the general. Interesting.
He said, you know, that he would definitely put a woman on the ticket. So
yes.
He's trying to make it very clear that it will be a diverse ticket.
He's trying hard early on. I'm not sure that's going to be enough for him.
Ben, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.